Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Dirtbike magazine video. This is the life and times of the Yamaha YZ250, written by Ron Lawson. We know some of you would rather watch a video than read, so here it is. The Yamaha YZ250 two-stroke has now been in production for over 50 years. No other motocross bike has been around longer. There's no telling what the history of motocross would look like if not for the YZ250 and the people who built it. The list of technology that debuted on the YZ includes reed valves, single shock suspension, and power valves. Perhaps more than anything, the YZ250 is known for the legendary riders who used it to win. The list includes Gary Jones, Bob Hanna, Mike Bell, Ricky Johnson, and Jeremy McGrath. In Europe, Hakan, Andersson, and Neil Hudson, and Americans Danny LaPorte and Donny Schmit gave the YZ its championships. Perhaps one reason the YZ is undoubtedly mixed with the history of American motocross is because it was developed here. The very first YZ didn't come out of a well-lit R&D room at a Japanese factory. It was built in Southern California by Don Jones for his son Gary. Yamaha let the Jones clan go wild on the existing DT1 two-stroke. The bike that resulted won the first AMA Motocross Championship, then was shipped back to Japan to become the first production YZ. Jones won 2 titles for Yamaha, the first of which was taken from the Inter Am series. In the meantime, the monoshock rear suspension system was being developed in Europe by Hakan Andersson, who used it to win the 1973 250 World Championship. Pierre Carsmakers won the inaugural Supercross series for Yamaha in 1974, but the next American YZ250 champion didn't come along until 1977 when Bob Hanna moved up to the 250 class and utterly dominated motocross for 3 years. In that time, he won 3 Supercross titles, 2 outdoor championships, and had a 22 moto win streak. This was, of course, the height of the works bike era when factories were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on exotic factory bikes. But Yamaha made a point to race production-based bikes at certain times in this period, both with Hanna and later with Rick Johnson. After Hanna broke his leg at the end of the 1979 season, Mike Bell won his lone Supercross title in 1980. Brock Glover raced and won on the 250 from time to time, although he was more closely associated with the YZ125 and YZ490. Then came Ricky. Rick Johnson's success was legendary, but only the years of it were with Yamaha and the YZ250. After he left, there was a void left that didn't get filled until Damon Bradshaw came along. The most striking thing about Bradshaw's career was his ability to not win championships despite winning races. He still sits in 13th place on the all-time Supercross win list, but doesn't have a single national title to his credit. Jeremy McGrath was probably better known for his years at Honda, but in 98, 99, and 2000, he won Supercross titles on a YZ250. In that time, his closest rival was fellow YZ250 rider David Villeman. The last national motocross championship to be earned by the YZ was the 2004 Supercross title with Chad Reed. In off-road, the Yamaha YZ250 was and remains a bike held in high esteem by both motocross and off-road communities. In fact, no other bike has proven so capable in both worlds. It won 3 GNCC championships with Ed Lojak, Fred Andrews, and Barry Hawk. It won 2 national enduro titles with Randy Hawkins and Ty Davis, 3 works championships with Ty Davis and Nathan Woods, 7 national hare scramble championships with Jason Raines and Doug Blackwell, and it even contributed to a national hare and hound title with Ty Davis, who rode the 250 in select events. If you go strictly by the numbers, the YZ is more of an off-road bike than a motocrosser. It has 15 off-road championships and only 14 motocross titles. Add them all up and the YZ is the winningest cross-platform racer in America. In '68, Yamaha introduced the DT1 two-stroke and everything changed. Before that, no one would ever consider racing a Japanese bike professionally. Even though that first model was no racer, it became a platform for various racing venues because it was light and reliable. European motocross bikes would still rule, but their days were numbered. In '74, the first YZ250A was introduced. This was based on the bike that Gary Jones had used to win the 1971 National Championship, which was actually derived from his top American status in the Inter Am series. According to the legend, Don Jones had shipped the bike to Japan with A to Z written on the tank, meaning it had everything modified from A to Z. Jones had made a new frame, cast his own engine cases, and strapped on a CZ alloy fuel tank with a bridle tack. When the bike arrived, it was redesignated the YZ because most Yamaha models began with a Y, but it was remarkably true to what Jones had built, right down to the strap on the tank. In 1975, Yamaha's other development program was taking place on the European front with Hakan Andersson. Andersson started the 1973 season with a works version of the YZ, but at the third race in Belgium, he debuted the YZ monoshock and won. That bike, in turn, was the foundation for the 1975 YZ250B and its monoshock rear end. It was far and away the best bike of its day, but things were changing so rapidly that it was totally redesigned the very next year. In 76, prior to this point, Yamaha had two dirt bikes in the lineup, the YZs and the lower priced MXs. 1976, the two were merged. More accurately, a YZ logo suddenly painted on the MX250's gas tank and the price was increased. As a corporate measure, purists were bummed the loss of the ultralight YZ250, which was virtually a works race bike. In truth, the 76 version worked just as well as its predecessor, despite the additional weight. But Suzuki unleashed the RM250 bombshell and the YZ was overshadowed. In 77, Yamaha caught back up quickly. A whole new bike was released with a super small motor, a lighter frame, and more travel. The fuel tank was plastic and the swing arm was steel. The 1978 model looked almost identical, but had more travel and an aluminum swing arm. Bob Hanna was in the middle of his win streak at this time, and Yamaha would raffle off his production bike to the public after each race. In 1979, this was a standalone year for the YZ. The 1979 model got a different look and motor that was abandoned after 1 year. In 1980, to this day, the YZ250 of this period are highly regarded and sought after. Suspension and power were excellent, and the 1980 model was almost identical to the 1981 version, aside from the gearbox, which went from a 6-speed to a 5-speed. In 1982, everything changed, and not necessarily in a good way. The 1982 YZ250 was a technological milestone. It was liquid-cooled with the radiator mounted on the fork. It got the first production power valve and linkage between the swing arm and the shock. Almost all of these measures needed more development, but the bike was rushed. The radiator location had a bad effect on handling, the shock was enclosed where it could get no airflow, and the power valve was located so far away from the piston that it had little effect. In 1983, Yamaha started to iron out the designs of the previous year. The radiators were relocated to the frame, and the shock was moved halfway down to the swing arm. These little changes continued in 1984 and 1985, but Yamaha was also dipping rather heavily into the snake oil, with features like the bass valve on the shock and the boost bottle. In the last year, the yellow and black color scheme gave way to white and red, and from that point on, US models looked just like European counterparts. In 1986, this was another complete redesign. The 86 Yamaha got a new chassis and bodywork, and most of the motor's internals were massaged. The front brakes were hydraulic. The most important of all the changes was the relocation of the rear shock. Now, the monoshock rear suspension was essentially the same as Honda's, with Suzuki and Kawasaki soon to follow. The advantage of having the first single shock rear end was long since forgotten. After this, there was a long period of minor change. The years of complete bottom to top redesigns were at an end. But the motor gained massive low-end power in 1987 and yet another set of bodywork in 1988. In 89, the Kayaba fork was inverted, which launched years of controversy. Many insisted that the old-style fork with the inside tube on top was a better design. No matter, the inverted fork would stay, although it would improve greatly over its debut in 89. For the next few years, Yamaha made dramatic changes to the YZ's appearance. It got new plastic in 93, turned purple in 94. The most significant change was the new top end in 1995, the power valve chamber that looked like a huge tumor on the side of the motor. In these years, Yamaha was losing the horsepower war to Honda, but making steady gains in the suspension department. In 1996, everything except the motor changed. The frame was redesigned, and between the new bodywork and new color, the YZ got a new identity. The annual changes in color stopped, and from this point on, Yamaha would be known as the bike in blue. The motor, however, was still a weak point. In 1999, Yamaha finally got sick of being the opposite of fast. The old motor was entirely tossed out. The YZ power plant hadn't received this much attention since 1992, and it probably hadn't received this much improvement ever. The bike's throttle response and fun factor increased significantly. For the next few years, Yamaha refined the motor in small ways, but it's essentially the same today. In these years, Yamaha dominated magazine shootouts. In 2002, the YZ's frame was next on the hit list. The chassis got a remake in 2002 with slimmer bodywork and a new airbox. But by this time, more and more development resources were being diverted to the four-stroke projects. In 2005, Yamaha gave the YZ250 one last present before turning burning out the lights in the two-stroke R&D department. The YZ got an aluminum frame. It's interesting to note that Yamaha had been testing aluminum as a frame for material for a long time, even predating Honda's 97 CR250. When aluminum finally came to the entire YZ line, Yamaha used a conventional backbone layout instead of a perimeter design. The test riders were doing whatever it took to make the new frame handle like the old one. Since then, Yamaha switched to a perimeter layout for the four-strokes, but the YZ250 and 125 frames have been unchanged since 2005. In 06, the KYB SSS fork arrived, and the basic platform for the YZ250 was established for years to come. Prior to this point, the two-strokes at Yamaha were keeping pace with the four-strokes, at least in the chassis department. But in 06, the YZ450F and YZ250F got a second-generation aluminum frame, whereas the two-strokes did not. In 2015, cosmetic changes grabbed everyone's attention. The shrouds, the number plates, and the airbox and fenders were updated to look more modern, or maybe just less dated. There were also minor suspension updates. In 2022, there were more changes in 2022 than there had been in any one year since 2005. The most obvious was the bodywork. The shrouds, fuel tank, and seat were redesigned to make the seating position more level from front to rear, with smoother transitions and a narrower width in the knee grip area. The seat height was slightly taller in the middle, but lower in the front. Along the way, the fuel tank lost about a quart, now measuring 1.85 gallons. The entire subframe was different as well as the airbox. Yamaha says the airflow resistance had decreased by 15%. In the suspension department, Yamaha said that most of the fork was updated to the same pieces as the current YZ250F four-stroke. The axle carriers are obviously different from the Fs to accommodate a smaller axle, and the valving is completely different. The spring rate is slightly heavier compared to the previous year's YZ250 two-stroke, from 4.3 to a 4.4. The shock was updated with new valving and a heavier spring rate at 50 versus a 48. Going forward, today, the Yamaha YZ250 lives on and its future seems safe, aside from the fact that there would be riots if it were discontinued. It sells enough to justify its place in the line and remain the last of the Japanese two-strokes. We're fine with that. If any one bike deserves to carry the two-stroke flag, it's the YZ. Well, that wraps up the life and times of the Yamaha YZ250 two-stroke. We hope you enjoyed this story by Ron Lawson. If you like this, we got more on dirtbikemagazine.com, and we'll have some more videos soon. We'll see you down the trail.